politicians, the environmentalists, the scientists, they don't understand what the miners fundamentally know. The metals aren't going to be there and ready in time.
Today's guest is a supporting sponsor of Liberty in Finance. Welcome back to Liberty in Finance. We're delighted to have this returning guest. Nolan Watson is the president and CEO of Sandstorm Gold Royalties. He joins us this Friday, November 4th, 2022. Nolan, thanks for coming back on Liberty in Finance.
Well, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
We were introduced to Sandstorm through Rick Rule almost 2 years ago. We had you on together with him. We've had you on by yourself. You're back to give us an update and some big news about changes coming for Sandstorm Gold that may be of interest to existing shareholders and prospective shareholders, of which I am a shareholder, have been since Rick recommended it a couple of years ago, and have added when opportunities have arisen since then. And I wanted to ask you about this big picture shift you see going on for Sandstorm, basically responding to changes in the industry environment and the regulatory environment that's going to be supporting the industry going forward. We have a whole bunch of viewers' questions, but before we get to those, I want to make sure to ask you about this big change you see coming, which I think you've described as the green energy revolution for the world, and how Sandstorm has created a vision for its new role in that new world.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think it's been a big year for Sandstorm. We've dramatically increased the size of our company. We've acquired a number of our competitors, had to take on some debt to do it, and we've built a much bigger, much more diversified, stronger company with more cash flow, and so it's been a lot of work. You probably see the bags under my eyes. It's been I've been up at 4:30 every day this week just working, and the work continues. But it's been a great year. We've got a good vision for where we're going with the business, and we're really excited about it. It's unfortunate that we do all of these tremendous things and build this great business, and then have it also happen to be at the exact same time where the entire world is coalescing around the greatest interest rate hike cycle ever, and the collapsing of stock markets, and funds having to liquidate, and so the share price hasn't performed well, and it's been frustrating for me. But I'm really proud of the base that we've built. I'm really proud of the company that we've built. I'm really excited about the vision and this green energy transition that you just mentioned, and you might wonder, well, what the heck does a gold royalty company have to do with the green energy transition? Those seem like apples and oranges, but I'm a big believer that the greatest business opportunity of our generation is going to be the fact that the entire world needs to decarbonize, and the climate change is more of an existential threat than even most people think it is. Whatever scenario people have built in their heads as to how bad climate change is going to be, I think it's going to be worse. Whatever financial scenario they have built in their heads as to how it's going to hurt our economies, I think it's going to hurt our economies worse. In terms of whatever scenario you built in your head as to how it's going to affect humanity, I think the eventual scenario that will play out will be worse. And being a mining guy in the mining industry, I know that the metals that are required for this green energy transition, they're not available. There are not enough mines. There are not enough copper mines. There are not enough nickel mines to do the transition that we need to do as a world, to make the windmills, to make the solar panels, to make the electric cars. And we're within 5 years of a massive deficit of critical minerals to allow this green energy transition. I'm actually going to COP27 next week in Egypt with all the governments of the world to figure out frameworks for dealing with climate change. And as a mining guy, I'm the person there pounding the table going, you don't understand all of these plans that you're making. We don't have the metals. They're not ready. When I first got into the mining business, it took 5 years from the time that you could put a drill hole into the ground to the time you could get a mine up and running. Well, that takes 15 years now. And it should take 15 years because we need to properly and methodically evaluate these properties and make sure that we're doing right by the environment and the communities as to how we develop them. And it should take that long. But the problem now that we have is there aren't enough mines known and ready to be developed that are going to be able to produce the metals for this energy transition. It isn't going to happen. And so what does a gold royalty company have to do with the green energy transition? It just so happens that a lot of the world's best deposits of things like copper and nickel and other metals typically come with gold as a byproduct in those deposits. So when we have the perfect model, the streaming and royalty model, to finance the generation and completion of those projects, where we can step in and say, here's $500 million. Go build that mine. The world needs it, but we want all the gold as you mine it. And that comes back to us. So we stay a pure play streaming and royalty company, making lots of money off of the gold theme, which I believe the gold fundamentals have really never been stronger in the long term here. And our shareholders are going to make a lot of money in the very long term. But we've got the perfect financing model to help the green energy revolution that's going to happen. It's going to be the most capital intensive revolution that's ever happened in business on planet Earth ever. And it's more capital and financing is going to be needed than ever. We have the right model, the right time, and the right metals as byproducts, which is gold and silver that we're looking after. So it's the right time, the right team, the right place. Sandstorm has finally built the right infrastructure to be the company that takes advantage of all of this. And I'm very excited. I'm also very tired because I've been working a lot. But it's a good time to be Sandstorm.
So if I'm getting this correctly, you're saying that the ambitious goals that world leaders are setting out for transition to renewable infrastructure to support green energy is going to require metals we don't have because they haven't been developed. To develop those is going to take financing of those mines. That's what royalty and streaming companies can do. And since you're a pure play gold company, and Mother Nature hid the gold treasure together with those other base metals that are necessary for the green energy, you should be able to build a profitable financial model on taking the gold stream off of those while enabling the way the industry needs to go anyway. How has your message been received so far? Do you think it's getting the traction that it needs with regulators and with lawmakers to really make a difference, or do you feel like it's
the politicians, the environmentalists, the scientists, they don't understand what the miners fundamentally know? The metals aren't going to be there and ready in time. I had a family office of an Asian billionaire family, and they were in my boardroom last week, and we were talking about the green energy transition, and they are one of the primary backers of one of the new up and coming big electric vehicle manufacturer companies that are manufacturing electric vehicles in China. And they were showing me all these graphs of all these electric cars that they're going to make, and how much money that they're going to make as a business. We're going to make so much money making all of these electric cars. And I said, awesome, that's great. Where are you going to get the copper? And they said, well, what do you mean? I was like, no, you need lots of copper in each of those vehicles. Where are you going to get it from? They're like, well, we'll buy the copper in the markets. I'm like, there's not going to be enough. What are you talking about? they don't know. The world does not understand that this is going to be a problem. Like, we need to decarbonize. Climate change needs to be fixed, and there aren't enough metals to do it. And so this is the great challenge of our generation of business, and it's going to take an entire generation of leaders to step up and fix this issue.
What's your plan of attack? How do you plan on breaking down those barriers of ignorance? If you believe that the mission is sound, that that's the direction we must go, then how are you planning on reaching the decision makers so that they remove the barriers that are inhibiting and prohibiting the development of the resources necessary to accomplish those missions?
Yeah, so it's things like I am going to Egypt literally tomorrow. I'm jumping on a plane and going to Egypt, meeting world leaders to talk about this, because the world leaders need to be in a room. They need to understand these issues. You have to get the leaders of industry and the leaders of countries together. You need Canadian governments in the same room with African governments, in the same room with commodities developers, understanding what the problem is and how to solve it and where things need to be debottlenecked and streamlined. We have to be methodical about this too. We can't just start rushing a bunch of mines into production to save the environment, because if we ruin the environment on the ground and we ruin communities by trying to go too fast, that's also a risk too. So there has to be this thoughtful and methodical tone from the top about how do we do this green energy transition in an environmentally responsible way on the ground and in a socially responsible way. And quite frankly, one of the problems that the world has, and I'm a humanitarian by background. I actually started a charity, a registered charity that I still run today, long before I started Sandstorm. We've got 700 kids in school in Africa. We're the top performing academic senior secondary school in all of West Africa. And I care deeply and passionately about humanitarian things. But it just so happens that the easy deposits to be found and mined are in the developing countries because they were politically risky, and because the easy deposits in Canada and the US have already been found and have already been mined. And we need to go to the places where there is poverty en masse, but we need to do it thoughtfully. And it's an opportunity to bring them out of poverty. Like we have the opportunity to fix the climate in this green energy transition and to fix global poverty at the same time if we're thoughtful about how we do it. And the investors of the companies that do it and get it right have a once in a generational opportunity to make enormous amounts of money and profit off of it.
It's interesting because you talk about the urgent, I would call it backlog. When we interviewed Keith Neumeyer and Rick Rule together, they talked about massive metal shortage coming. We've met with Kodiak Copper, same message, and so on. So that theme has been coming out for the last couple of years from the industry, but it doesn't seem to be reaching the halls of government decision-making power in order to support and enable the kind of responsible development that's going to be necessary on a timeline that's going to be necessary to meet those goals that are being set out. What I'm hearing from you is time is of the essence, and there needs to be a diligent approach, but that takes alignment. It takes people being on the same page and realizing, oh yes, that we do need to do all of these things together, but let's do them in the right way. So glad that you're a voice for sanity in that what otherwise seems like it just becomes a tragic comedy disconnect between, just kind of pie in the sky objectives that are being thrown out there without the boots on the ground underpinnings that are necessary to make them happen. How do you plan? You said talking to people, getting them together. That's good. I don't know if this is the Egyptian Climate Accord that conference that's going to be happening on in Egypt that you're going to be attending. What other methods do you imagine to try to get the alignment as quickly as possible so that the right steps can be taken in the right way?
Look, that's the $1 million question. I don't know the answer to that, unfortunately. I mean, COP27 is a good start. I'll be there. The World Economic Forum is a really good forum that brings in. I mean, one of the problems in the world that we have right now is that people in the political spectrum don't talk to each other. Left wing hates the right wing, and the right wing hates the left wing. And environmentalists hate industry, and industry hates environmentalists, and that's got to stop. And there needs to be a forum where people all get into the same room. I mean, I remember one time many years ago, I was in China, at the Great Wall of China, at a conference, and I had been put at a table with the CEO of WWF, one of the Scandinavian WWF countries, and I asked her what she did, and she's like, "Oh, I'm the CEO of WWF." And she asked me what I did, and I said, "I'm the CEO of a mining company." And she was aghast, and she looked like she had seen the devil face to face by looking at me. And but by putting us in a room together, she could understand that I actually do have a heart for the environment the same way that she does. It's just that I know that there's a business side to things, and there's an economic side to things, and the world needs to move forward and needs to do it thoughtfully and methodically. And we need environmentalists in the room not thinking that we're evil, and we need to be in the room not thinking that they're the enemy, and we need to work together. And so I don't have the answer to your question, but we need a coalescence of minds from all political spectrums, from all people getting into the room, solving this problem, because it's huge and it's not going to be solved easily, and it's not going to be solved in time.
Yeah, that's the thing that I'm getting, is that even if you have the alignment today, it's still going to be a huge amount of work to be done, and it's going to be hard work. It's going to be needs to be started in the right way. So getting that start means getting that alignment and getting that communication, getting the meeting of the minds. So you certainly have our support. Anything we can do to help get the word out there. This may be a small piece of that. You never know who watches these. We've got over 76,000 subscribers and adding about 1,000 a month. So people forward this widely to people you know who are either concerned about doing things in a way that's sustainable, and also but doing things that we need to do to move the ball forward here. Another topic that's a big one is how companies relate to their shareholders. We have both shareholders in our audience as well as potential shareholders, and Sandstorm's been following a management model that maybe in some ways have been influenced by traditional methods, that sort of thing. One of the questions that was submitted by one of our viewers is a bit provocative, so I'll just lay it out there and let you field it. And I think that it might fit with kind of a strategic management style change that you've been contemplating. J.M. Oliver says, why did you say that you would never dilute shareholders? Do you feel like your shareholders should finance your acquisitions by losses in share price? How can your promises be trusted in the future?
Yeah, well, I love provocative questions. I was raised by a mom at the dinner table who was not afraid to just poke and stir up controversy every night, and truth was always valued. And so I'm used to answering questions like that. But what I would say is that one of the things that I have been fortunate enough to have had come before me is a number of leaders that I have learned from, and business mentors, and they have taught me a lot of really valuable lessons in business. I mean, my father, he is a mentor professionally. His job, people literally pay him money. He has 18 CEOs who pay him an annual retainer to be their mentor of the CEO. Ian Telfer, the Telfer School of Management. If you go to the University of Ottawa in business school, it's the Telfer School of Management. I work directly for Ian Telfer and learn from him and so on. And I've had a number of other leaders in my life that I've learned directly from, and they've taught me all of these great wisdoms of how to run companies. But one thing that I've started to realize over time is that although there is some truth in some of those wisdoms, that some of it is broken, and some of the way that things have been done maybe isn't the best way, and sometimes some of the things that I have then therefore done have not been the best, and I'm trying to learn from that and find new ways and move forward. And so, for example, one of the things that I was always taught is never trust your investors with the truth when it comes to an equity financing. The first time I literally heard that quote from one of my mentors I was like, what are you talking about? And they said, well, no, think about it. Think about it, Nolan. If you really care about your investors, you want them to make the most money per share. And if you know that you need to raise equity to go do an acquisition, if you tell your investors what you're thinking, what you think you might buy, how you're thinking about the world, and that you need to raise equity, most of your investors will say, okay, that's great. I understand the plan. That's good. But some of your investors who are sharks will front run that, and they will sell their shares knowing that if you're going to raise equity, you're going to have to do it at a discount. And so I'm going to sell my shares today, and then I can buy them back cheaper into the financing, and I can clip 6%. And so some of the investors who are acting in that way are hurting all of the other investors who aren't acting in that way. And so, the wisdom that was given to me was, Nolan, you owe it to your other shareholders who believe in the long-term vision not to tell them, so that the bad acting shareholders don't have the ability to front run the financing and force the share price down, because their selling will push the share price down, and it will make it so that the company has to raise money at an even lower price. So you have to surprise people. Like, so that's one of the wisdoms is save your good investors from your bad investors by not telling them what your plan is. And, I think in the last year, especially in the last couple of months, I've come to the conclusion that I understand why that can be seen as a wise way to do business, but I think it's the wrong way now that I think about it. One of the other things that I've always been taught is you're never going to make all your shareholders happy. Some shareholders may say do this, and some shareholders may say do that. And no matter what you do, you will always have a portion of your shareholder base that's disenfranchised. You'll never make them all happy. And therefore, as a CEO, one of the things you should do is you should go and make sure that you spend a lot of time nurturing potential new shareholders, so that every time you make a decision, some of the shareholders who are unhappy sell their shares. You've got new shareholders there ready and willing to buy those shares. And what I find as a CEO, I spend most of my time doing now is sometimes just trying to find those new shareholders. And some of those new shareholders aren't actually really, really interested in becoming shareholders. They might be shareholders of one of my competitors. They might take my time and spend all of this time with me just trying to understand how I think because they want to understand how the competitor of the company that they've invested in thinks. And so they're wasting my time. But the problem is not only is my time valuable to me, my time belongs to my shareholders. And so I think that whole model is wrong in the sense that I need to be not focusing on finding new shareholders. I need to be focusing on explaining my thoughts fully and thoroughly and having my existing shareholders know that I value them more than new shareholders and that I want to spend more time explaining to them how I'm thinking and what I'm doing. I'm not going to get every decision right. Absolutely not. Like, I am not perfect. If you talk to my wife, she knows I'm not perfect. And my shareholders need to know that I'm not perfect. And they need to know that I know that I'm not perfect. But they need to know that I want an honest and genuine relationship with them, and that I'm going to stop taking the advice of some of the leaders that came before me, and I'm going to start charting a new course of telling people what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. And if investors want to front run the financing, I have a feeling, because I do believe that the green energy transition is so big and the opportunity is so massive and the world has such a big problem that needs to solve, that Sandstorm needs to get bigger to do that. And we can make lots of money for our shareholders if we can take advantage of that and be the company that does that. There will have to be more equity financings in the future. But I have a feeling if I change the way I think about shareholders and how I relate to them, that I think that there will be fewer shareholders that want to sell their shares, and fewer shareholders that try to front run a financing, because the demand for those financings, I'm guessing, will be much, much higher than they were in the past. So that I can look at the list of all the people who went into that financing and say, you're out, you're out, you're out, you're out, you're out, because we don't need your money. And so the people who tried to front run the financing, the shareholders who are acting badly and trying to hurt all the other shareholders, they're going to be the ones that get hurt, because they'll have sold their shares, they won't get to buy shares in the new financing, and the share price will take off. And that's how I plan on doing things going forward.
That kind of radical transparency is pretty gutsy. It not only requires trusting your shareholders, it requires being transparent externally, and that means your competitors are going to have indications in advance of what your intentions are as well. That can make takeovers. You mentioned the internal impact of your own share price being affected by intentions being expressed, but there's also the targets that you're thinking of going after that you might want to have confidentiality about that until the last minute or whatever. So anyway, that's pretty gutsy.
Well, it is and it isn't, in the sense that I used to think I'm a competitor, like captain of a basketball team in high school and captain of a hockey team, and I like winning, and I am competitive by nature. In fact, when I was raising my daughters one time, I said, "Hey Ellie, let's let's walk up these stairs together. And my daughter, she just ran up the stairs and she goes, I win. Like, we didn't even declare it a competition. She made it a competition. She goes, I win. And my wife looked at me and she's like, Nolan, you did this. Like, this is you. This is your competitive nature. And so I do have that competitive nature. And one of the things that I think it has been detrimental to me is that the competitive nature, I think, is no longer required in this particular business model in this particular time, in the sense that the green energy transition and the problem is so big and so much capital is required and so many mines have to be developed. I used to think that there were too many streaming companies and too much capital chasing too few opportunities. And I'm seeing that over the next 5 years, I think that's going to transition to there is not enough money in streaming companies to take advantage of all of these things that need to be done. And that we're actually all on the same team trying to solve all of the same problem. And so just in the last few months, behind the scenes, I've actually started working with the CEOs of the other companies, bringing them inside my thought process and saying, here's what we're doing. I hope you will do the same thing. Like, I want you to come alongside of us because we have a giant problem that we collectively have to solve, and we're all going to make lots of money and enormous amounts of returns for our shareholders if we do it well and we do it collectively and we do it together.
That's what I was looking for, was kind of that breakthrough, and that's even maybe as significant as the investor relations communication revolution, and that's the changing from just a cutthroat competitor mindset to a how are we all going to get together in a way that's going to tackle this problem that's maybe bigger than any of us alone can handle, but together we can lick this thing. Very interesting. Nolan, if people want to find out more about Sandstorm, what's their best place to start, and what steps should they take?
Yeah, sandstormgold.com. Google works real well.
Sandstormgold.com, and we'll put the link, some stock information and links inside the description of this video, people, if you'd like to have something to click on. It's there. And always grateful for your visits here, Nolan, always giving us kind of a fresh and energetic approach that really wakes us up and makes us think, put our thinking caps on about what's coming next in what's going to be a very dynamic time. So thank you for joining us on Liberty and Finance.
Thank you.